Okay, so I need you to be honest with me for a second. I want you to think about the last time you walked into a room in your house. Maybe you're heading to the kitchen to grab a drink, or you went into the bedroom to find your phone. You cross the threshold, you take 2 steps inside, and then nothing. Just blank. You're standing there looking at your own stuff, and you have absolutely no idea why you're there. You feel like an idiot, just buffering in the middle of your own life.
It is the single most universal frustration of being a person. We all do it.
I do it constantly, and
Yeah.
usually I just chalk it up to being tired or distracted.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling you're going to tell me it's not just me losing my mind.
It's not just you. In psychology, this actually has a formal name. It's called the doorway effect.
The doorway effect.
And if you dig into the, let's say, the standard neuroscience, the stuff you'd find in a textbook, there's a very logical, very comforting explanation for it.
Okay.
It's called event boundary theory.
Event boundary theory.
Yeah.
That sounds surprisingly technical for I forgot why I wanted a spoon.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's actually a fascinating mechanism. So think of your brain like a computer with limited RAM.
Right.
When you're in the living room, your brain has a living room file open. It's tracking the TV, the couch, the conversation. When you cross the threshold into the kitchen, the brain says, okay, scene change. It closes the living room file to free up space.
And opens the kitchen file.
Exactly. The problem is the thought, I need a spoon, was saved in the living room file, so the moment the file closes, poof, the data's gone.
So it's just my brain being efficient. It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. That is the comforting scientific consensus. It tells us our brains are working perfectly. But, well, that is not why we are here today.
No, it is not. Because we are looking at a stack of files from PopVibe Studio that take that comforting explanation and basically throw it into a fire. They have a very different theory.
It's a deeply disturbing one. PopVibe suggests that the reset isn't memory management. They ask the question, what if you didn't forget? What if you just stepped into a version of the room that wasn't meant for you?
Whoa, a version of the room that wasn't meant for you. That phrase. I mean, it implies that reality isn't solid, that when I walk through a door, I'm rolling the dice on which reality I land in.
And in this wrong version of the room, the reason you entered, the thirst, the need for a spoon, it just doesn't exist. You didn't forget the purpose. The purpose was never written into this timeline. You are a glitch.
See, this is why I love these deep dives. We start with, I forgot my keys, and 5 minutes later, we're questioning the fabric of space-time. But this is really the theme for us today. We aren't talking about ghosts or, slasher villains. We are talking about the horror of the almost.
The almost. That is a perfect way to frame it. The PopVibe files we're looking at are all about psychological horror, but specifically the kind that exploits that 1% of the brain you can't control, the part of your survival instinct that fires when something is familiar but wrong.
And you can't talk about familiar but wrong without hitting the big one. The concept that has, totally taken over the internet. The Uncanny Valley.
It is everywhere.
And I feel like most people know the vibe, right? You see a robot or a bad CGI character, and they look human, but not human enough. And instead of just thinking, oh, that looks bad, you feel physically sick. You feel repulsed.
But here's the question that PopVibe immediately highlights. Why? Why does that reaction even exist? Evolutionarily speaking, emotions are tools, right? Fear keeps us from getting eaten. Disgust keeps us from eating poison. So why do we have a specific violent biological rejection of things that look almost human?
I was just assumed it was.
Yeah.
Confusion. Like my brain doesn't know how to categorize it.
It's deeper than confusion. I mean, think about the timeline. Human beings have been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years. Robotics and CGI have existed for, 50 years? 60?
Yeah.
We didn't evolve an anti-robot reflex. That hardware was installed in our brains eons ago. So what were our ancestors seeing that looked human but wasn't?
Okay, when you put it that way, that is terrifying. Because there are only a few options.
The source argues there are two main drivers. The first one is, it's pathology. Corpses.
Corpses, right?
A dead body looks human, but it doesn't move. It might be discolored. It carries disease. So we evolved a stay-away instinct for things that look human but lack vitality.
That makes perfect sense. Don't touch the dead guy, you'll get sick. But the Uncanny Valley isn't just about stillness. It's about the thing that smiles with its mouth, but not its eyes.
And that leads to the second, much darker theory. Predation.
Predation.
Imagine a predator that mimics its prey. We see this in nature all the time. Insects that look like leaves, spiders that look like ants. The theory is, what if, at some point in our distant past, there was a threat that learned to look like us? A predator that learned to walk on two legs or mimic a human face to get close.
So the Uncanny Valley is basically an ancient alarm system. It's our DNA screaming, "That's not your tribe, that's a monster in a costume."
Precisely. The source material uses a really great phrase. In the wild, if something looks like a human but acts like a predator, you run. It's a binary choice, fight or flight. But
There's always a but.
PopVibe argues that in true psychological horror, you can't run because the predator is inside the perception.
The predator is inside the perception. Okay, let's unpack that because that sounds abstract, but it feels heavy.
Well, think about the processing lag. When you see a glitchy human face, your brain is doing a massive amount of computation. It's comparing geometry, texture, microexpressions. If the predator is inside the perception, it means the threat isn't the thing you're looking at. The threat is the fact that your brain is failing to render reality correctly.
So it's not that I'm scared of the robot. I'm scared because my brain, my main tool for survival, is telling me lies.
You're scared because you can't trust your own input. If you can't trust your eyes, you're defenseless. It's a helplessness that is so much more profound than just seeing a tiger. You can run from a tiger. You can't run from your own visual cortex glitching out.
Wow, okay, that sets up a really disturbing hierarchy. We started with the room being wrong, the doorway effect. Then we moved to the stranger being wrong, the Uncanny Valley. But the source material takes it one step further. It gets personal.
It does. This is where we get into what they call the Mandela effect on steroids. We have to talk about Capgras delusion.
Now, usually Capgras is treated as a rare medical condition, right? A neurological misfire where you think a loved one has been replaced by an imposter.
Correct. Strictly speaking, it's a disconnection between the visual recognition part of the brain and the emotional center, the amygdala. You see your mother, you recognize her face, but you don't get that warm, emotional glow of familiarity. So your brain invents a story. That looks like mom, but I don't feel mom, so it must be a clone.
That's the textbook definition. But PopVibe treats this not as a malfunction, but as a scenario, a horror archetype. And they paint a picture that honestly made my stomach turn.
It's the intimacy of it that's so brutal.
Yeah. They describe waking up next to your spouse, someone you've been with for 10 years. You know everything about them. But you wake up, you look at them, and their eyes are just a shade off.
Not a crazy color. Not red or glowing, just slightly lighter. Or the pupil is a millimeter too wide.
Exactly. And the source points out, logic says, that's my spouse.
Real.
But your gut, your soul is screaming intruder.
And this is where the horror just escalates. Because if it were a monster, you'd scream. If it were a burglar, you'd call the police. But this thing knows your secrets. It knows where the coffee mugs are kept. It cooks your favorite meal.
It is toxic familiarity. That's the term they used.
It's the ultimate violation. The source argues we don't actually fear the dark. We fear what the dark hides in plain sight.
Yeah.
Taking the safest place in your world, your home, your partner, and turning it into a trap.
And it isolates you completely. Because who are you going to tell? Hey, my husband's an imposter because his eyes are wrong. You sound insane.
You're trapped. And that isolation is the bridge to the next level of this. We've gone from the room to the person. Now, PopVibe takes us to reality itself.
This is the part of the deep dive where we get into the deep web territory.
Oh.
The source references a case study, a story circulating on forums that the studio claims to have analyzed. It's about the breathing void.
And this story is all about the concept of a waking dream. The subject is a man who effectively stopped sleeping, but started hallucinating while he was conscious.
He describes this very specific thing. For 10 minutes, every single day, the walls of his apartment would change.
They didn't just melt or disappear. He says they turned into windows, floor-to-ceiling glass.
Now, normally, a window is nice. But these windows didn't look out onto a street. They looked into a parallel void.
A gray, endless space. No ground, no sky, just infinite depth.
But it wasn't empty, was it? And this is the detail that gets me. It wasn't silent.
No. The man made audio logs during these episodes, and the forensic audio analysis, according to the source anyway, claims that the background noise wasn't static, it wasn't wind.
It was breathing.
Millions of people breathing in sync.
Now, just try to imagine that sound. It's not a roar. It's that wet, rhythmic sound of inhalation and exhalation, times millions.
It creates this awful cognitive dissonance. A void is supposed to be empty, lonely. But this sound implies the void is crowded, it's packed with things, but you can't see them.
And the fact that they're breathing in sync, that's the real kicker. If it was chaotic, just a crowd noise, that's one thing. But in sync implies coordination. It implies a hive mind.
Or a single, massive organism.
Right. It implies you aren't looking at millions of people, You're looking at one thing with a million lungs, and it just makes you feel impossibly small.
And that really is the core philosophy PopVibe is pushing here. We started this whole thing talking about forgetting why you walked into a room, a small, personal glitch. We've ended up staring into a void filled with a million invisible breathers.
It's all about the realization that you are not in control.
Exactly. The source summarizes it by saying, horror is not a jump scare. It is the realization that you are never truly alone, even in your own thoughts.
Even in your own thoughts. That circles all the way back to the doorway effect, doesn't it? If my brain can delete a memory without my permission, if my brain can tell me my wife is an imposter, if it can show me a breathing void who is actually driving the bus.
The source phrasing is chilling. It says, your subconscious might be trying to evict you.
That is a terrifying metaphor. The idea that my consciousness, am just a tenant, and the landlord is getting ready to kick me out.
It recontextualizes the Uncanny Valley, doesn't it? Maybe the predator isn't some external monster. Maybe the predator is the architecture of your own mind deciding it doesn't need you anymore.
Well, I think we've successfully ruined everyone's sleep schedule for the night. But we can't wrap this up without the final challenge. The source ends with an experiment.
I will say, as the voice of reason here, maybe don't do this if you're already feeling a bit anxious.
Oh, absolutely. But if you're curious,
Yeah.
here's what PopVibe says to do. Tonight, when you're brushing your teeth, you're in front of the bathroom mirror, it's late, the house is quiet.
The instruction is to look at your reflection, but don't look at your whole face. You need to focus your gaze specifically on the left eye of your reflection.
Just the left eye. Lock onto it, and
Then you wait, you watch, and you're looking for lag.
lag, like a video game.
The source warned, if you blink and your reflection blinks a millisecond later, do not panic.
A millisecond later. Just enough to notice. Just enough to realize the image isn't instantaneous.
And the reason you shouldn't panic, according to the text, is that panic just alerts the system. If you see the lag, it simply means you've caught the rendering engine slowing down.
Just realize that the studio is watching back. That's the quote.
It breaks the fourth wall of your own life. It implies the reflection isn't light bouncing off glass, it's a projection. And if it's projection, someone is operating the projector.
It fits perfectly with their motto. Stay paranoid, stay curious. It wants you to test the boundaries.
It transforms brushing your teeth into a Turing test for the universe.
It really does. So, look, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the biological reason you run from corpses to the philosophical dread of a simulated universe.
And the common thread is always the fragility of perception. We trust our senses completely, but all it takes is a millisecond of lag or a slight change in eye color for that trust to just shatter.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. It brings us right back to the start. The doorway effect.
The reset button.
Tonight or tomorrow, it's going to happen to you. You're going to walk into a room and forget why you're there. You'll be standing in your kitchen, confused.
And the standard advice is to go back to the other room to retrieve the memory.
Right. But knowing what we know now, knowing the PopVibe theory, you have a choice. Do you turn around and try to find your way back to your original timeline? Or do you just shrug, grab a glass of water, and decide to stay in the version of the room that wasn't meant for you?
It's a gamble.
Thanks for taking the dive with us. Stay curious.
And stay safe.